Hi, I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated,
I'm Boris from Board and Seated.
and we are continuing our iconic monster series. This time we are again continuing with the undead, and we are talking about the ghost.
Boo.
So, ghosts are probably the single oldest concept of undead in history. They go back in literature. Well, we'll get to literature in a second. They go back in story. Basically, as long as you've got the history of people, you have the history of ghosts.
Yes.
Um, the history and concept just goes back forever. The fantasy ghost is a little bit less ambiguous, and we'll get to that in a minute. But every early civilization has their own ghost stories. Most ancient religions have their ghost stories. Most current religions have their own ghost stories. Among the earliest
Yep.
recorded ghost stories come from ancient Rome, talking about, this is one of the common themes of ghosts, an old man with a long white beard rattling chains and haunting their home that they used to live in when they died. So
Yep.
that is where a lot of the
And,
general ghost stories came from.
yep. And you have your Christmas Carol with all the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, as well as a lot of movies. Not as many as zombies or vampires, but
Of
still,
course,
yeah.
but honestly, again, that's the reason why ghost stories are a little different from everything else we've talked about. Because with ghost stories, you don't need to go into the movies. You just need to talk about the stories. You need to talk
Yep.
about the short stories. You need to talk about the poetry and things like that. And really, when
Yep.
ghosts came back into a main concept of when the 19 in the 19th century, we had a huge hit on spiritualism. Spiritualism came back into fashion, especially in Victorian England and especially in the Northeast in the United
Yep.
States. We had a lot of people basically getting into the idea of being able to contact their former selves or being able to contact things. They've got mediums and all of that, and that's where really
Right.
ghosts came into play. And this is where our first modern ghost story comes into play. Most people decide first modern ghost story is The Tapestry Chamber by Sir Walter Scott, which
Right.
again should tell you some idea about how long ghost stories have been around in general.
Yes, totally agree. And the most interesting thing is the continuous, because you mentioned mediums, the continuous of magicians trying to debunk mediums. Starting with Houdini, who always debunked the mediums as because he would want to speak with his long dead mother, and would totally debunk all those mediums, to modern day Penn and Teller debunking mediums and charlatans about talking with ghosts and the dead, which is a little bit interesting pop culture uh,
And
interaction.
absolutely, the thing is that pop culture, like this is one of those times when pop culture is not going to be about the movies, and really ghosts are not that popular in like our game system. The ghost is iconic, but it's not something you fight against all that often. It's
Right.
really about the stories. It's about like the concept behind life after death, which is the reason why everyone has an opinion on ghosts, and it's a major topic. Even though again, it's not necessarily as big in role playing games. It's not as popular as a vampire or werewolf or
Yes.
zombies.
Yes. Definitely agree.
However,
And
there's a couple of major differences between ghosts between Fifth Edition and Pathfinder 2.
yep.
First, let's talk a little bit about Pathfinder 2.
Yep. So Pathfinder 2 has two ghosts, unlike fifth editions. They have a CR4 and a CR10, where the CR10 is a ghost mage with spellcasting capabilities. But because fifth edition only has one, we will do the comparison between the ghost commoner in Pathfinder 2 versus the ghost in fifth edition. But that said, the ghosts in Pathfinder 2 also can be used as an add-on onto character class, and they do get other abilities that really give them a little bit of what I consider an edge and more storyline playability. More interesting storyline playability within a campaign versus the your basic fifth edition ghost. Now, the more deadly of the two is the fifth edition Ghost overall because of the aging capability. And
Yeah, th- So yeah, when we talk about the differences here, their CRs are the same. They're both CR4. Their hit points are basically, it doesn't really matter much about their hit points in AC because the systems work differently. The main thing that we have to talk about between the differences are, first, 5th edition ghosts are resistant to most items. They're resistant to pretty much everything except for radiant, psychic, and force damage, and magical weapons. Now, the reason why this makes a difference is because just having a magical weapon, in 5th edition, having a magical weapon at all is a big deal, which is the reason why they did that. Whereas, again, in Pathfinder, you're expected to get magical items. It's part of the build of your character. But because of that, in Pathfinder, they've got something that, again, previous editions of D&D also did, which is that they are immune to non-magical attacks. Or in this case, they are not immune to non-magical attacks. They have double resistance versus non-magical attacks. So Pathfinder 2, they have double resistance versus non-magical, whereas in 5th edition, they're just resistant to a lot of stuff. And they're immune to a few things. They're immune to cold. They are immune to necrotic damage, and they're immune to poison. Now, getting into the thing that makes 5th edition ghosts so much more deadly than the basic ghosts in Pathfinder is horrifying visage. Now, this isn't necessarily something I even think of when I think of a ghost, unless we're talking about the ghosts at the beginning of Ghostbusters in the library.
Yes.
That thing had a horrifying visage, the scream, they all ran away, makes perfect sense. So what horrifying visage does is basically makes you take a wisdom saving throw. If you fail the wisdom saving throw, you're frightened. That's fine. However, if you fail the saving throw by 5 or more, you are aged by D4 times 10 years. So you could be aged 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Now think about this. If you're playing an orc or a half-orc or a goblin or a kobold or something like that, what's the average lifespan of that creature type?
It's like 30 or 40 years.
If for a lot of them, it's not very old. You might literally age yourself to death in a single failed save.
Yep.
This isn't something I think of when I think of a ghost. It's something I think of when I think of a banshee or a poltergeist. And that's the reason why the 5th edition ghost is a little bit more used for some other things, and the fact that it is, at that point, a little bit more deadly. Because, again, if you fail to save multiple times as a human, you might literally kill yourself by being aged to death.
Right. The more interesting thing is both ghosts have the possession capability of living creatures, but the ghosts and pathfinders also have the possession capability of objects, which gives you an interesting things within role playing. You find that magical sword, but it's possessed by a ghost. So those types of role playing scenarios are really interesting. And yes, you can play around with the rules in 5th edition, but sometimes without listing those types of capabilities, people might not think about doing things like that.
Yeah, the thing is, there are definitely people who will make the argument that they don't want the rules all laid out there for them. They want just the baseline so that they can play around with them as they want. But there are other people who want that kind of idea put into their head, that it's like, oh, these new ideas are here, let me use that. So for the major creative type, the 5th edition book is a little bit more of just a baseline, but the extra creativity and extra things that are put into the Pathfinder concept does make it a little bit more universally usable, even though the system itself is less friendly to the newer player or someone who's not as good at using their math skills.
Yes. So overall, I would say the 5th edition Ghost is far more deadlier. The Pathfinder Ghosts are more versatile and are easier to be used in a role-playing type of scenario. If you're doing a haunted house, you can have a ghost in every room, or a ghost to objects, or you can have fun by having that +1 magical sword that somebody found be possessed by a ghost, which, sort of goes, wow, I found an intellectual item. Not really. Throws that little twist to the overall game and campaign and role-playing scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to say I agree. Overall, I think the 5th edition basic Ghost, because of the ability to, again, age you to death, is a far deadlier creature. Also, the amount of damage that it does as a CR4 is ridiculous on its hit. Both ghosts in general, especially with their ethereal abilities, are very difficult to fight against in general. Ghosts are a very difficult creature to deal with, and also but again, both of them to their role playing, they only appear in certain places. There's reasons why they appear. One of the ways you can deal with a ghost a lot of the times is try to figure out why they're still on this plane of existence and fix it, and then they'll go away happily instead of trying to destroy the ghost. In a lot of cases, destroying a ghost doesn't even do anything.
Yep. And just to go, if you really want to see the effects of ghosts, I think a really good movie to give you those ideas, and that is in line with what the ghosts are capable within the Pathfinder, is Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. I think that movie really pointed out to all these different types of ghosts and their capabilities, and is in line and is a good movie to watch to give you some ideas.
Yeah, The Frighteners is an excellent movie, and it is definitely a good ghost-based movie to be able to watch, and there aren't a lot of ghost-based movies out there, so that does make it that much better. I think that's basically everything. Again, if you guys have any of your own opinions, please let us know in the comments. If you disagree with us in any way, agree with us, go ahead, like, subscribe, all that stuff.
So this is Boris from Boredom Sated.
Jonathan from Boredom Sated. See you guys next time.
Please see you guys next time.